Welcome to Micro Lecture 4.1. In this one, we're going to talk, I'll give a little bit of background about Sir Robert Peel and his rules. It's kind of a fascinating little part of history in criminal justice. All right, so to set up the stage here, London in the early 1800s was undergoing a massive population explosion. The English had just won the Napoleonic Wars. They were industrializing. Large numbers of people were moving into the cities. There had been a few precursors to a national police force in England, the Bow Street Runners and a few others. There was some yeomanry. But as the city of London got bigger and bigger, it became almost impossible to control it. Several times, in response to civil unrest, the government was really compelled to bring in troops. And this is actually the origin of a term you may have heard, read the Riot Act. If you read someone the Riot Act, it's an English law that essentially, when it is read out to a crowd, gives the authority to arrest those people that are gathered and to punish them severely. In fact, execute them if necessary. So this was seen as a very heavy-handed tactic. People were worried that if they had to keep using force, that it wasn't going to work out well. Now, a few other countries had police forces. The French famously had developed a national police force, particularly during the Napoleonic era. A lot of that was focused more on what we would call the secret police or the internal police, to anti-political. London's really the first one that is created intentionally and solely to deal with crime. So this is Sir Robert Peel. He was pretty wealthy. His father had made a lot of the money. And he enters Parliament. He was considered a very brilliant man. He enters Parliament in the early 1800s and quickly moves up. He is eventually appointed Home Secretary. And as Home Secretary, he was kind of in charge of a committee and a group that came back with a report about why they needed to form this new police department, this new thing that was called the police. So this new force, which their nicknames became Bobbies, or in a derogatory sense, they were called Peelers. So if you liked them, you called them Bobbies. If you didn't, you called them Peelers. One of the things that was established quite early was these were not supposed to be directly a militarized unit. So there were no military ranks. It's very common in the United States that you see privates and captains and sergeants and majors. And the English, with the exception of bringing the term sergeant in, didn't bring in a lot of rank structure, certainly at the beginning here. So I'm going to give you the 9 fundamental rules. I'm just going to briefly go through them. I'm going to let you read them, but I'm going to summarize them. So number 1 was really stating that the purpose of the police was to prevent crime and not to use repression and military force. The second idea was that the police were reliant upon the public and that they functioned best with public support and respect. The third part, or the third of his fundamental rules, said that to keep that respect, they really had to show that they wanted the public to cooperate. And if they could maintain this, they could keep people obeying the law voluntarily, which is what they wanted. They didn't want to use force. They always wanted to recognize that the more physical force that the police are compelled to use, the less cooperation they get out of people. They also did not want to get to be popular just by doing whatever the public wanted. They wanted to be seen as impartial servants, really to be as extensions of the neutral law. The sixth one there, they did not want to use force. They wanted to use persuasion, advice, warning, all these first, and force was supposed to be the last resort to achieve law enforcement's goals, and also it was supposed to be the minimum amount of force necessary. It was not supposed to be deadly force. As a consequence of this, of course, the police force was not armed, still isn't armed directly in England. The final couple rules here was, and this is probably the most famous thing, the historic tradition that, and here's the direct quote, that the police are the public, and that the public are the police, that there shouldn't be any separation between the two. Also, the last one's pretty much not saying, number 8 saying the police shouldn't be the judges of this, they are just apprehending people and allowing a magistrate to make the decision. And the last one, which is one that I emphasize in my class very much, is to recognize that the most efficient police force is the absence of crime, not the presence of police officers dealing with crime. Okay, we'll close then at the very short lecture, as I said, about 5 minutes. These are pictures of the first Bobbies. You'll notice that they had these kind of stovepipe, what most people would call, in America at least, kind of Abraham Lincoln hats. And that today they have these kind of conical hats, and they've had those for more than 100 years. It's kind of tradition. And you'll notice also that's a shot of English police today in front of a public bar, and they remain unarmed. That's it.